Hello everyone, my name is Noah.
And I'm Alessandro from the Google Developers team.
We would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us today for GDG DevParty, an event organized by 5 Google developer groups in the UK and Ireland.
Now, while this event will of course be a bit different to your usual GDG meetup, we think it's going to be a lot of fun and perhaps a rare opportunity to get to know fellow developers from all over the UK and Ireland, and maybe beyond.
Although the current situation is far from being ideal, we are really excited to have so many people from all over getting together and sharing ideas.
It's fantastic that we are able to get together like this, even if it's only through our screens. And now, we will let the GDG organizers tell you more about them and kick off the event.
Enjoy the Dev Party!
So, just to introduce ourselves, this is the team that has worked to organize DevParty. We are a group of leads from a mixture of different GDGs, including London, Oxford, Southampton, Galway, and Milton Keynes.
Hello, I'm Bushra, and I'm from GDG Oxford, and I'm one of the moderators for the machine learning track today.
Hi, I'm Jason from GDG Milton Keynes, and today I'm working on the YouTube live streaming for this event.
I am Casey Nur from GDG Oxford.
My name is Karthik Nuli and I'm from GDG Southampton.
Hi everyone, my name is Oscar McCauley and I'm from GDG Southampton and I'm going to be a moderator on the machine learning track today.
Hi, my name is Shadab and I am from GDG Galway.
Hi everyone, this is Jen Ashley from GDG London.
Hi, my name is Swapnil and I'm from GDG Galway. And today I will be giving a talk on Google Cloud storage options along with demos.
I'm Antoine Danois, Android developer at CityMapper, and I will be a moderator for the mobile track, and I'm part of the GDG London.
Hi everyone, my name is Goran from GDG London, and I will be one of the cloud moderators for today.
My name is Nader Salin, I'm a software engineer at Uptelum from GDG Oxford. I will be a moderator on the cloud track.
Hi, my name's Eddie, and I helped put together this video intro. I have a YouTube channel focusing on open source. You can always catch me there.
So, before we get into the talks, let's just go through what you can expect from today and how the event is going to be structured.
As you're probably aware by now, the event is going to be split into 4 tracks running in parallel, each representing a different topic. Today we've got a great range of topics. We've got a track for mobile, one for cloud technologies, another covering machine learning, with the final track covering issues of diversity and ethics in the world of software development.
These tracks will contain 3 sessions, each session lasting 45 minutes. These sessions will contain a 30-minute talk and a Q&A at the end. When the Q&A is finished, there will be a 5-minute break to swap over between speakers. At this time, if you want to change tracks to listen to another topic, you are welcome to do so.
Once all the talks have finished at around 7 p.m., we'll then all get together in a Google Meet call for a party. This is meant to be a bit of fun where you can just chat to other developers that you might have met throughout the day and perhaps make valuable connections you wouldn't have otherwise been able to. Obviously, not everyone has the time to sit and chat for a long time, so we'll officially end the event at 7:15 p.m. But those who want to stick around on the Google Meet call for longer are more than welcome to.
Here's another reason you might want to join the party at the end though. The hashtag GDG DevParty throughout the day on Twitter and manage to join the party at the end will be in with a chance to win one of 3 prizes. We'll be giving away a Google Chromecast, a Nest Hub, and a Nest Mini to 3 lucky winners who tweeted out hashtag GDG DevParty on Twitter. So make sure to get tweeting and to join the party at the end where we'll announce the winners.
That was a quick rundown of how our time together is going to be split up. But we highly recommend for you to go and have a look at the tracks and schedules section of the DevParty website. This will allow you to plan which talks you want to watch.
Additionally, I would like to explain how each track will be organized in terms of what platforms the talk will be taking place on and how you can interact with the discussion.
The sessions will be held on YouTube Live, with the link to each track's live stream being posted on the DevParty Slack channel. For the link to the Slack channel, see the DevParty website, where there is a link to join under the How to Participate section. This means you can seamlessly switch between tracks after a talk has finished by closing one live stream and opening another through the links provided on Slack.
YouTube Live will allow you to post comments so that you can ask questions throughout the talk, which will then be read by the moderator and posed to the speaker. Please do understand that the speaker might not be able to answer every question due to time constraints. So obviously, please be sensible with your questions. We want to make the session as interactive as possible, so please don't be afraid to put forward your thoughts and engage with the talk throughout the comments.
So, thank you for listening. We hope you have a wonderful time and gain some great insights into whichever topics you choose to explore today. If you encounter any problems, please let us know through the Slack channel. But for now, get comfortable and wait for the first talks to begin.
Welcome to the DevParty.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Ethics and Diversity track. I am. Next slide, Casey. Okay, so sorry about that. Technical issues. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are your moderators today. I'm Jen Ashley from GDG London, and we've got Shadab from GDG Galway and Casey from GDG Oxford.
In terms of housekeeping, each of the 3 tracks will have 3 sessions, each consisting of a 30-minute presentation and 15 minutes of Q&A. If you have questions, feel free to write them in the YouTube chat, but remember to follow our code of conduct, which is available at the link here. If you want to make a post on social media, you can use the hashtag GDG DevParty. And if you want to join us afterwards, there will be a party at 7 p.m. and it will occur on Google Meet. The link is in the Slack channel. If you tweet about the event, you'll be entered into a prize draw, so come to the party to win. The full event agenda is here with all of the speakers and the time. Feel free to switch between tracks if there's a particular topic that interests you.
All right, so here is the track agenda. So our first talk of the day, which is happening soon, is Diversity Matters, or Why Your Build Fails. It will be given by Emma, who is a developer advocate at Google Cloud Platform. The next talk will start at 17:30 GMT plus 1 time, which is a technologist introduction to epistemic injustice. An interesting talk, and this talk will be presented by Kat Swetel. Kat is an engineering manager at Verica. And the final talk of the day will start at 18:15, which is Public as Programmer, Participatory Design and Machine Learning Ethics. This talk will be given by Christine Meinders, and she is the founder of Feminist.ai and the Cultural AI Design Tool. Okay, next slide, please.
Thanks for that, Casey and Shadab. So to start off, we're going to start with the first talk to be given by Emma. Shadab said she's a developer advocate from the Google Cloud Platform, and she's going to be talking about diversity matters or why your build fails. So I'm going to hand it over to Emma now to present her slides.
Hello. Can everyone hear me? Or I don't know. If there's an issue, please feel free to post on YouTube, and so that we can address that. Hi. I know it's a horrible title, but this talk is about build systems and diversity at the same time. My name is Emma. I'm a developer advocate at Google, And my Twitter is YURYU. So feel free to drop a comment or question if you like. So let's move on. And I have a quiz for you. Which of these characters can you use as a file system, file name on Linux? Can you use a clone, or can you use a quotation mark, or can you use emojis? Like, why do you have 3 emojis? Are they treated differently? Like, do you have any idea? So originally, I would ask you to raise a hand, but feel free to drop a comment on YouTube so we can see that. Do you have a guess? So it turns out on Linux you can use all these characters. Of course, depending on font or the terminal you use, you can't render everything. But all of these are treated differently, and these are all valid file names. And how about on Mac OS and Apple FS? Can you use emojis or colon, quotation mark on Mac? Well, on Mac, you can't use the last emoji, but you can use everything else. And you see an interesting error here. It's an illegal byte sequence. That's a pretty interesting error for a file name, isn't it? But you can see the characters, and depending on the font you have, or depending on the software you use, you can see some of the characters, but not always like everything. And how about on Windows and NTFS? Can you use colon or quotation mark or emojis? So I'll move on, but you can't use a colon or quotation mark in a file name on Windows, because a colon is for the driver letters, and I don't know why you can't use quotation marks, but you can use all these emojis. Of course, I couldn't display the emojis on PowerShell, but you can see the first emoji on Explorer. So if you see all the answers here, on Linux, you can use all the characters. And on Mac, you can't use all the emojis, but you can use the special symbols. And on Windows, you can use all the emojis, but not all the special symbols. And I said depends for the yawning emoji on Mac, and I'll explain why it depends. So on an ext4 file system, you can use all bytes except null and slash, because these are delimiters. So you can put any byte as a file name. And on Apple FS, you can use all valid UTF-8 characters, UTF-encoded Unicode characters as a file name, and they actually validate whether you are using a valid character or not. So depending on the version of the operating system, you can't use some of the latest characters. So the grinning emoji was introduced in 2012. So all Apple FS capable macOS recognize that character. But some of the latest emojis are introduced more recently. And the last smiling, crying face is introduced this year. So macOS still doesn't recognize the character. And on Windows, you can use any UTF-16 call unit except slash, backslash, and some other special symbols. So they don't validate the Unicode sequence, but they restrict more characters than other file systems. So why did your build fail? Maybe you try to create a file name with a colon on Windows. And there are other reasons that your build could fail on Windows. For example, your tool might be in the program files directory, which has spaces, and you try to invoke the command without quoting. So you ended up invoking c:colon / program instead of the full path. And the unlinked system call deletes read-only files on Linux, but the equivalent API delete file W doesn't delete read-only files. And you don't have the shell or the env command on Windows, so you fail to invoke these commands. You can't touch or cat a file on Windows. These are Unix commands. And this is not really a Windows-specific topic, but depending on the version of a protocol buffer compiler, they refer to different header files, and not everything is available, depending on the version you have. So these are some of the errors I've encountered recently. But why would you want to use Windows? Well, it's the most popular desktop OS. And in fact, Windows has nearly 80% of the market share. So if you want more developers on your project, you might want to support Windows as a development platform. And because this is a diversity talk, and I want to talk about everyday diversity issues as well, but we are more different than OSs. So we need to pay attention to that difference, right? Even these three OSs are different than each other, and so are we. We assume everything. Like, we don't make decisions from scratch every single time. And we often assume, like, we read characters from left to right. The path delimiter is /, and we have a common date format, and that's MMDD or DDMM, depending on where you're from. Streets have names, and your mother has a maiden name, and it's secret. So we are inherently biased, and these items are not necessarily true, but we make decisions based on an assumption, and you make products out of these assumptions. And when assumptions are not true, things break. I recently requested an extension for something, and they said, okay, we extended due date to June 1st, and 5 minutes later, I got an automatic email saying, your due date is 01/06/2020, and it's past due. And obviously, they mix up the European date format and the American date format. And probably you've experienced, like, you've seen something like Best Buy 03/10/20, and you have no idea whether it's a very old canned food from early 2000s, or it's valid until March or October. And if you're in another country, your assumptions could be different from the reality. This is the left-hand side is a map of Seattle, and the right-hand side we have a map of Tokyo. And even in downtown Tokyo, they don't have street names, so you can't tell people to go to a certain direction based on street names, and people get lost. Sometimes we make wrong assumptions because we just don't know. Like, did anybody know all the differences of which character you can use on which operating systems? I certainly didn't. And you don't necessarily exclude certain platforms or certain culture of people. You just don't know, and you can't take that into account when you don't know that fact. I have a few more examples. So software in the 1990s, they had fewer resources, and they made a lot of assumptions. And for example, Japan was pretty good at handling multiple characters in the 1990s because they have a lot of characters. But because the country has only one time zone, like, time zone support was pretty much non-existent. And in the US, because the country has more than one time zone, they are pretty good at handling time zones. However, I wouldn't say the multiple support was good for Americans, like, software. And we still see the consequence of poor time zone support. You probably have seen something like this in a JPEG file. So EXIF is a file format to store metadata in images, and EXIF didn't have a time zone field for a long time. The first version was released in 1995 by JADA, and they didn't have a time zone support for 2 decades. And by the way, JADA stands for Japan Electronic Industries Development Association. So you can probably tell why it didn't have a time zone support from the first release. And sometimes we forget how it was at the beginning. This picture is the female programmers for ENIAC, and ENIAC is one of the earliest electronic computers in the world. And they had female programmers, and the reason is really, really strange. That's because people thought hardware engineering was the prestigious job, so let women handle the boring part. And today we know software engineering and programming are as interesting or as important as hardware engineering, and we all pretend like we forgot, like we had women as one of the earliest programmers in the world. And we don't know exactly why this happened, but one of the hypotheses we have is here. So in the past, we didn't have as many women in higher educations, and as the gender gap narrowed, they began to have more women enrolling in these fields, math, law, medicine, physics, and computer science. But from the mid 80s, we saw a decline in the number of enrollment. And one of the reasons is because we use computers before entering a university, while you don't necessarily start studying medicine before studying medicine at school. And computer software companies and hardware companies started marketing computers towards boys and not girls. And people say that's one of the possible reasons. Inclusion and diversity is about us. We want to be successful, and we want to work with our full potential. And psychological safety is a crucial factor when we are creating an inclusive workplace. And we want to create an equitable workplaces. But it's also about users. When we don't know about users, we can't create an accessible product, inclusive product. And this is an extreme example, but we might be developing something like this without realizing. But we can fix it like any other problems. For example, Unicode, when it was first released in 1996 or 1991, they assumed that they could fit all the characters in the world into a 16-bit space. And they had the 65,000 character space. And they soon realized they made a mistake, and they fixed it in the second release of Unicode. 5 years later, they addressed the mistake, and they introduced surrogate pairs to extend the space to more than 1 million characters. And today, the latest version of Unicode supports 283 characters to represent 154 scripts. So that's way more than the initial limit, right? And by the way, this is a breakdown of the different characters in Unicode. And the biggest blue section is the Chinese, Japanese, Korean Han characters. And that there are more Han characters than any other scripts combined, like all the other scripts combined. So if you don't know the fact, if you don't use the Chinese characters, you you don't know, like you can't fit everything in a 16-bit space. And another example is vertical writing in computers. In some of the East Asian languages, they write vertically, not horizontally. And horizontal writing was supported from the version 1 of like any web browsers. You can pretty much render characters horizontally all the time. But vertical writing wasn't the case. So you couldn't represent certain novel or certain writing systems in web browsers. And today, most of the modern web browsers support vertical writings as well, and CSS has a new property to select the directions. But if you look at the numbers, for example, Chrome supported vertical writing in version 46, and it was, I think, in 2016. So that's how slow we were to support a certain writing system. But we fixed it anyway. And you can read this Japanese novel in HTML as you would in a book. So we can fix issues once we recognize the problem. This is a real-world example where Japanese medical schools manipulated test scores to limit the number of female students they admit every year. And this became a huge scandal, and pretty much all media in Japan and internationally, they reported that accusation. And the Ministry of Education investigated the issues. And a year later, women outperformed men in entrance exams. So after they stopped manipulating test scores, they fixed one problem. And they long had this practice to manipulate test scores. And once they recognized and then people raised concerns, they fixed the problem like in a year, in less than a year. So once we know the problem and raise concerns, we can fix it. Sometimes people just don't see problems. This is from a video about the youngest woman equity trader in the New York Stock Exchange, and her name is Lauren Simmons. And she talks how the life and the workplace is like for her in the video. And in the same video, the CEO of her employer says, I don't know why more women don't apply for jobs on the floor of the exchange. And when you're the CEO of the company, you are probably missing something when you say this, right? And Simmons is not just the youngest woman on the floor. She is the only full-time woman trader at the New York Stock Exchange. And when you have that massive gender gap and you don't see the issue, you have a certain privilege and ignoring some issues there. So we know how to debug technical issues. We observe the problem and we identify the cause, hopefully the root cause, and we develop patches. And we can think with this framework to address real-world problems. And some people are stuck there. They have certain privilege and they don't see the problems. And so we need to report the problems. And the bright part in the open source development world is the bug reporter doesn't always need to fix it. Like you only need to report it, and that's appreciated. And so speak up and finalize. Some people don't even see problems, so report bugs for real-world problems. And if you are not comfortable speaking up by yourself, finalize. I think there are certainly people who can support you. You don't need to do everything by yourself. And if you have the courage, if you're brave, we have other tools like blogs, YouTube, and Twitter. For example, when Susan Fowler wrote this blog article about sexism at Uber, eventually the CEO of Uber resigned, and the woman on the right-hand side, Isis Anshlet, Anshli, when she started this campaign, I look like an engineer. This became a social media movement. So when you speak up on these new platforms, you can make even a bigger change. And just like building problems, we have tools as well. So for example, when you're starting a new project, you don't write shell scripts from scratch to build something, and you use some of the existing tools. And that's true for workplace issues. This is one of the examples, but Rework is a framework that Google releases, and we use at a company every day to address workplace concerns. And there's a 6th section to reduce biases in workplaces. And I think more importantly, it's okay to be wrong. You don't get everything right from the beginning. And I must say, I have messed up too. And you just need to admit and apologize and move on. And the issues are not faults. Like being wrong is not your fault. People see different things. But we need to collectively change the system, not to repeat mistakes. That's my talk. Thank you very much. If you have questions, comments, feel free to drop a comment. Thank you. The thing about no street names in Japan blew my mind. That's, yeah. Whenever you travel in Japan, you can't navigate yourself just as you'd in another country. The thing about no street names in Japan blew my mind. So I can't hear Jen actually.
Oh, sorry about that, Emma. Yeah. So yes, that thing about the street names in Japan is very interesting to me. I didn't realize that was the case. I've been in Japan before, but yeah, that's something new to me. So I can't see any other questions, but can I maybe like just ask like a question specific to Google? Like, what are the programs that Google are implementing to ensure a diverse and inclusive workforce?
Sure. For example, I think one important piece is to recognize we all have biases, and we have biases not necessarily because we won't have a bias. We have biases depending on how you grew up. So one of the earliest trainings we take when we join the company is bias busting trainings. So you explore what kind of biases you have. Of course, it's a very sensitive information, so you don't necessarily share what kind of bias you have, but by realizing you have certain biases, you can change your behavior. So that's one of the examples we use, and that's also on the Rework website.
Yeah, I've seen a video from YouTube, from Google, about this, and it's a very good video about biases, and I'll encourage everyone to check that out. I think it's an hour long, if I'm not mistaken, but it's worth watching it. It's very, very educational. And I know that Google also has a program called I Am Remarkable, right, where we encourage women to talk about their achievements. I believe that's also been expanded to our male counterparts. Am I right in saying that, Emma?
Can I say the last part again?
The I Am Remarkable program?
Yeah, I took the program once in Tokyo, and it was a really interesting experience. I haven't really done that.
Yeah, it is it's a very, very simple exercise, but I think it's very, very powerful. And as far as I know, that's been extended, beyond Google, and it's also being implemented and run by other companies. And I know there are a lot of like trainers as well across the globe, doing that. So if anyone's interested in finding out about that, just go to just Google "I Am Remarkable" and you'll find more information about that.
I think there are public sessions as well.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And you can be certified as well as a trainer. So if anyone's interested, in being one of those, just check the website. Just checking if there are other questions here. Any other questions, Casey? Maybe you have some questions for Emma or Shadab.
And thank you, Giovanni.
Okay.
Somebody else asked a question about a link to the video.
Sure. I think I can share something in the comment. Sorry, I can't reach the keyboard from here, but I'll do that after this.
Thanks, Emma.
So what sorts of assumptions have impacted your own line of work? Because you're talking a lot about assumptions people make and things like that.
So I think one of the nasty things is that people assume I'm not technical, based on my appearance, and when I'm the technical role, so when two of us talking to somebody at a conference, and when an attendee asks a technical question to my male counterpart from marketing or sales, and they redirect the question to me, but that's suddenly annoying.
Shadab, do you have any questions?
Yes. So more than the questions, it's an observation. So one of the type of the bias that is normally we don't talk in bias is about some kind of elite club, where old boys, they have their own elite club and they have a bias about a newcomer. Okay, you are out of the league, you're not here, you don't belong here. Okay, you cannot contribute to what we are doing. So have you, Emma, had to experience any such bias other than the gender specific?
That's an interesting question. I think when you work with people close to you and kind of the same environment, we all tend to forget what the life is like outside the bubble. One thing, I think this is very classic, but you can learn from books, and education is another key. So we all know we live in different parts of the world, and we have different life, and education is, I think, an effective tool, and we need to do that with a proper format and proper enforcement. I think it's easier to address that systemically rather than depending on individuals' efforts.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Shadab and Casey, and thanks, Emma. I just want to remind everyone that we're actually, giving away prizes. So don't forget to tweet using the hashtag GDG DevParty. So you'll get a chance to win one of those 3 prizes we're raffling off at the party, after all the talks. So join that party as well. Thanks again, Emma. And we'll have a 5-minute break while we switch to the next speaker. So the next session will start at around 5:15 UK and Ireland time. So join us again, or if you want to switch another track, you can do so. But for now, yeah, we'll switch to the next speaker and prepare for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, okay. So there's a last minute comment here, Emma. Can you see the?
Sure. Some are not happy speaking up about their issue. You, for example, you might be gay but not wanting to show that at work yet. You see that, for example, there are not many LGBT specific. How address that? So I think that's the magic of having an ally. So I'm gay as well, and I haven't like spoken about that all the time, and I do these days. But when you have a powerful ally, they can speak on your behalf, not necessarily on your behalf. They can speak that as a generic issue, like, hey, we may or may not have like LGBTQ folks, and that's something we need to fix it, right? So it's not your problem, it's everybody's problem, and that's why we need change in the system. We need proper training, and we need like to educate everybody. It's not because we have like a gay on a team that we need to have an inclusive place for LGBTQ folks. It's the right thing to do, and it's the thing we need to do.
Okay, thanks for that. Let me see. Okay, there's another one from Natasha.
I've been in a technical role for some years and don't see enough women in the tech industry. I'm always the only woman on my team. What can we do to help improve this? Right. I don't have the answer, unfortunately. If I knew, I would have published it up already. Yeah. So I think there are many different approaches. One of them is to have kind of cohort. So unfortunately, we don't have as many events as we had these days, but we have events like the Grace Hopper Conference and other events where we recognize each other and we create the momentum to get more women involved in tech. And another thing is to hire from non-traditional backgrounds, like those students with like CS majors. You can perform the job without like the major. Like it's one of the licenses, but it's not the only license, right? And some companies are trying to hire people from more diverse backgrounds and educational grounds. So these are something I can think right now. But it's a tough problem, and the change hasn't happened overnight, unfortunately. We recognize it, but I think the biggest reason is that not everybody consider this as an issue. Like some people just fine having fewer women in tech, and we all, like, not necessarily we as women, but like people in tech need to raise a concern, and especially like men need to recognize, hey, this is wrong and we need to fix that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You know, this is as I always say as well. This is not a problem that just us women need to solve. You know, it's everyone's problem. It's societal problem that that needs fixing, and everyone needs to get involved. You know, in doing that, and we just need to keep on going forward and creating events that would or opportunities to get us there. It will take a long time, probably not in our lifetimes, Emma, but at least we're doing something, right?
Yeah, I really hope so. And once everybody agrees that that's an issue, I think the change would happen fairly quickly.
Okay, thanks, Emma. So I think we're going to need to switch to the next speaker. So I'll hand it over to Casey.
Thank you,
Casey.
Our next session will start at 17:30, and it's Technologist's Introduction to Epistemic Injustice. with Kat Swetel.
I'm just thinking, Casey, we're running well ahead of time. Shall we just go ahead anyway?
We can start.
Yeah, we'll have more time for questions at the end, I guess. I think Kat's here and ready, and anyway, so.
All right.
Should we do that? Okay. All right.
Hello. Can you all hear me okay? You should post a comment if you can. I just got a new Mac and it has a touch bar and I have no idea what I'm doing at all, ever. So that's not good. But anyway, I'm Kat Swetel. I work at Verica, which is a continuous verification company. And today I'm going to be talking to you about epistemic injustice and what the heck that is and why it matters for any of us. I guess I'll just get started with that. So first, a bit of a disclaimer. This epistemic injustice is a whole branch of philosophy, and I am not a philosopher. I'm a technologist. So you're going to be getting the point of view of someone out in the world working in industry, not a philosopher, even though this is a whole branch of philosophy. And if you find it interesting, you should go check out that whole branch of philosophy. Moving right along, what is epistemic injustice? So the definition that I like is from this book called Epistemic Injustice, The Power and Ethics of Knowing, and it's by Miranda Fricker. And it's basically when someone is wronged in their capacity as a knower. So your ability to know things for yourself and to convey that knowledge to others. That would be, if either of those are violated, then that would be an instance of epistemic injustice. The example that many of us are probably familiar with now that has kind of entered the public discourse, largely due to my country, the US. I don't know where all of you are located, but it's this gaslighting. So if you haven't heard of that before, the term comes from a play, which in the UK was first known as Angel Street, and then it got rebranded as Gaslight. What happens in the play is basically this woman, she falls in love with this guy, they get married, they move into this house, but he really wanted to have this specific house. And he says he gets a job in this new city, great, awesome. He says, okay, honey, I'll see you later, I'm going off to work. And every day, shortly after he leaves for work, the lights go down. It's a gaslit home, and the lights go down in the home. And then when shortly before he returns from work every day, the lights come back up. And she says, the wife says to her husband, she says, look, there's someone else in the house. When you're gone, I think they might be in the attic. And he says, no, you can't go in the attic. It's strictly off limits. And he basically starts trying to convince her that she's crazy and there can possibly be someone else in the house when he's at work. He does all these other things to try and convince her that she is going crazy and she can't trust her own memories and her own account of what is happening. And that's gaslighting, because as it turns out, he was the one in the attic every day. He's up there going through a dead woman's possessions. like you do, totally normal thing. But she knows that there's someone else there. The lights go up and the lights go down and the lights come up because there's only so much gas flowing into the house. When he turns on the lights in the attic, that makes the lights everywhere else in the house go down. So she knows, but he convinces her that she's crazy. So that's gaslighting. And that has become part of our discourse. There's a whole podcast called Gaslit Nation, and there's much talk about gaslighting and this act of trying to convince someone else that they're crazy and they can't trust their own account. So that's probably the most famous type of epistemic injustice right now for us, the one that we are likely familiar with. But there's lots of different ways that you could perpetrate an epistemic injustice. But generally, those specific instances can be sorted into two different buckets. And so those buckets, the first one would be testimonial injustice. And that's when someone is wronged in their capacity as a giver of knowledge. So you have knowledge and you're trying to convey that to someone else and you're unable to. And this is typically something about you where people don't trust the knowledge that you have to convey. Another way that I like to put this is that there are winners and losers in the credibility economy. So Emma brought up in her talk that sometimes just purely because she's a woman, she walks into a room and people assume she's not technical. So based on a specific attribute about her, people make assumptions, and that reduces her credibility. Not based on anything she did, it's based on who she is. For me, the thing that I struggle with is that you can do this to yourself. So I have a really non-traditional background. I don't have a computer science degree or any of those things. I didn't go to a fancy school. I have a finance degree from a state school. And I think this attribute about myself, I think that reduces my credibility in a technical context when very often it doesn't. But I bring this up and reduce my own credibility. So that's the other thing about epistemic injustice in general, is that it's something someone else can do to you. They can perpetrate an injustice. It's also something that you can do to yourself. So watch out for that. The second bucket, so there's testimonial injustice. That's something based on who you are, an attribute about you that reduces your credibility. Hermeneutical injustice is when someone is wronged in their capacity as a subject of social understanding. So this is when you lack the understanding to understand your own experience and articulate your own experience, or for other people to relate to your experience. And there are a couple examples that are given a lot for hermeneutical injustice. And one of them is postpartum depression. So there's an idea, there's a narrative about what it means to be a mom, and that you're filled with love and you just want this baby around you all the time, and all of these things. You're so happy to be a mother. And then we have some folks who don't have that experience. And they think, am I not meant to be a mother? This isn't what mothers are supposed to experience. Then, if they're lucky, a friend or a doctor or someone else will say to them, look, you seem to have these symptoms that we would associate with postpartum depression. And, you know, here's information about that. And they're able to make sense of their own experience. But because that's not part of our typical motherhood, new mother narrative, there are a lot of people who go and have that experience and don't understand. They think this isn't what motherhood is supposed to be. And so am I not a real mother? Was I not meant to be a mother? And when you transition from this point of not being able to understand your own experience to a point of being able to understand, or not being able to experience or not being able to understand the experience of others to a point where you can understand and appreciate the experience of others, there's often the feeling of waking up, right? So you can't really unsee that once you're able to appreciate the experience of others or appreciate and articulate your own experience. And for folks who are not playing an active role in the way that we generate collective meaning, we say that they are hermeneutically marginalized. So right now we have, now we have a very different understanding, but if we could zoom back in time, go back to this time last year, and I were to ask all of you, what does collaboration mean? What it, get something in your head that is the perfect collaboration. And I've done this before. I've asked a lot of people what that means, what collaboration means, and I get a lot of things described to me, like the, design exercise where we're all in a room together and we're scribbling on Post-it notes, and it's like the IDEO and all of this, right? Like we're physically co-located and we are interacting with our design space physically, yes? And now, what does collaboration look like in the time of COVID? Looks radically different, right? But you can see how some people would be marginalized from creating the narrative of what collaboration is in the old paradigm, right? People who can't physically participate in that, as in they may not be able to move around in the space, people that have visual impairment, folks that aren't able to travel to be co-located with others. And really successful team that I was once a part of had a bunch of different people who couldn't travel for a variety of reasons, so they couldn't all come together to be co-located. Some of them weren't able to physically participate in those types of exercises. Different people with just different limitations, and so the team had to basically think of everything as remote first, virtual first, and create that good experience. Well, now how are they doing compared to their peers during this time when by necessity we're remote first? So by building those muscles, right, and including those stories from the hermeneutic margins, they were able to create the ability to absorb more variability in their surroundings. So when folks are not participating in creating that dominant narrative, that's when they're hermeneutically marginalized. And in the last talk, we heard about the campaign, I can't remember what it's called, but this is what an engineer looks like. And it's all of these people who don't look like the stereotypical engineer. That's another example of someone taking folks who are marginalized and creating the narrative of what a developer is, and then bringing those margins in and incorporating some of that information into the narrative of what a developer is. So there's testimonial injustice to recap, and then there's hermeneutic injustice. And the way that we can kind of sensitize ourselves to these, we got to be listening for this kind of injustice to be perpetrated. So there are some phrases and kind of themes that if you listen for, you'll start to hear, and you can understand when there might be a form of epistemic injustice taking place in whatever your context is. So for testimonial injustice, we hear things, we hear people reducing the credibility of other people and other experiences based on who that person is. So something that I've certainly heard before in my career is don't be hysterical. Because the implication there is that if I really care about something, or if I'm trying to warn people about something that could occur in our ecosystem, or a way that a product might break or might not behave as intended, or might be used in a nefarious way, if I get really passionate about that, then because I'm a woman, it could be that I'm hysterical. I'm just way too emotional, right? So those types of things, when you hear people say something like that, that would be probably an instance of testimonial injustice. The one that I bet lots of us are guilty of, I know I certainly am, hermeneutical injustice, and that's when we say things like, that's unbelievable. Someone tells us the story and you're just like, how could that even happen today in 2020? That's unbelievable. When you say things like that, when I say things like that, I'm discrediting the person that I'm listening to, and I'm discrediting their lived experience. So watch out for saying, that's unbelievable, The other thing is, if that happened to me, I would have done. And that's often a good indicator that you are not understanding the positioning of the other person, right? So you might be speaking from a place of privilege and saying what I would have done because you aren't even able to fully appreciate the narrative of the other person. Why does epistemic injustice matter? Before I go into that, I am going to note that my son is in the background and he's super loud. He's 7, so just ignore him. But anyway, why does epistemic injustice matter for us as technologists? Well, I really like this quote. One misses a great deal by looking only at justice. So if we are looking for justice, what we're going to find is more just behavior. We're going to find for whom the existing system is just. We're not going to see who the existing system is marginalized unless we're sensitizing ourselves to injustice. And if we are sensitizing ourselves to injustice, or the other way to think about that, if we're sensitizing ourselves to who the system is broken for right now, by addressing those things, we can increase our resilience, right? So I talked about that team earlier that needed to, by necessity, they needed to create a good experience for people that were co-located and people who would only ever be remote when they're having these generative activities like design activities. They needed to make that experience good for everyone. Well, now when we're in the midst of this really uncertain time where everything is remote, all of us here, right? We're at this remote conference. Teams like that have had to create a space big enough for everyone to fully participate, they have this ability to absorb variability from their surroundings, from their context, right? So because they've had to adapt already, they're good at adapting and they're able to absorb more things from the surroundings. The other thing, if we're listening for the stories of how the thing is broken, the existing paradigm is broken, that's a form of risk mitigation. And there are big companies doing this right now. They're trying to take a measure of how diverse their teams are and turn that into something measurable so that they can think of that as risk mitigation. So I think there are lots of interesting examples of something that we would consider a big risk has gone to production and been enacted, and we say to ourselves, gosh, was there no person of whatever group on that team to tell them that that wasn't going to work, right? You know, number one, we have to create a space where people are able to bring up ideas like that wouldn't work for me because of these factors. And we need to treat those things as valuable. So if you can tell me how this is going to fail before it ever meets the market, then I don't have to pay for it to go out and meet the market and fail. So important risk mitigation there. If we can get stories from everyone and understand how a thing, a product, a service, whatever, may or may not serve the diverse needs of the market. So that's risk mitigation. And then weak signals, right? So if you're looking for innovation and if you're looking for disruption, should you ask the people that are benefiting from the current system? Or should you ask the people that are marginalized by the current system? The people who are marginalized by the current system are able to see the opportunities for that system to move in a certain direction. So if you're looking for disruption, you don't want to ask the people that are already being fully served by the current system. They're not going to ask you for things that could be totally disruptive to the current system. So if we want disruption, if we want innovation, we're in a time of unprecedented acceleration, then we need to go out to the margins and solicit those stories so that we can begin to get weak signals about where our industry, our market could shift next. And when we get that information from the margins, it's so valuable. So that's why epistemic injustice is important. And the other thing is that right now, we are able, as time goes on, as our technology matures, we're able to become more and more specialized. As we commoditize more pieces of technology, then we're able to get more and more specialized. But that also means that we are developing a very specialized vocabulary within each of those individual pockets of specialization. And if we're thinking about appreciating the experience of others, then we can begin to exchange stories across those specializations. And a great example here, or an important example, is in this book, The Challenger Launch Decision. And the author talks about all of these people knowing within their specialization that there were issues, right? And because those stories are not easily exchanged across pockets of specialization, no one can understand and appreciate the full magnitude of that risk. So it's extremely important as we see more and more specialization that we build the ability to exchange stories across specializations and appreciate experience across specializations. And just like anything else, you have to keep working at that and practicing that and become better and better at that. So it's a muscle that we have to condition just like any other. So how do we actually do that? Now we know what epistemic injustice is and the types of epistemic injustice that there are. How can we actually do something about it? It sounds like an impossible problem. And it's really not, right? I think there are some simple things that we can do to address the forms of epistemic injustice and create a more just environment in which to deliver technology. So the first thing, when we gather together or as we exchange stories with each other, in order to avoid the testimonial injustice, we can be really clear about why everyone is there. So we can be really clear when we begin a meeting, we begin a brainstorming session, we can just say, you know, so-and-so is here because they know about this thing. So-and-so is here because they know about this thing. This other person over here is here because they know about how those things interact. And so that way we're priming everyone who's participating in that conversation to appreciate the differences in the stories and realize that each one of those participants has credibility. It just might be from a different source than whatever else. So that's also a good exercise for you to talk about yourself. Why are you here? What's the unique point of view that you're bringing to the table? And that'll help you participate more fully in whatever conversation or activity. So first, to overcome testimonial injustice, why are we here? Why am I personally here? Why are the other participants here? The second thing we can do is be asking ourselves, instead of saying, that's unbelievable, we can ask, what would it take for that to be true, right? So sometimes I walk out of some activity or I finish something, we have some sort of retrospective and someone else will say to me, that was a terrible experience, whereas I'm like on top of the world, that was great. Instead of just saying that person is negative or whatever the case may be, I can ask, you know, get curious, lead with curiosity. Gosh, why was that a bad experience for you? My experience was so different, right? And so instead of just shutting people down or discounting their experience because it's very different from yours, you can ask, what would it take for that to be true? And that can sensitize you to other things that are happening, right? Like, for example, the team I was talking about earlier that had to adopt the remote first approach. When they first did that, they would read the issue number instead of reading the issue title. And at one point, we had a great conversation. Oh, we finally all understand how these things fit together. We walked out and asked someone who was on audio only, wow, wasn't that great? And they said, no, it was extremely difficult to follow. I had to be looking up tons of stuff in the background. And what we discovered there is that you need to read the title of the issue. And so that's what made the difference. And it ended up where that helped everyone have a better understanding rather than reading the issue number, read the title of the issues. And it gave a lot more context to the conversation. So instead of saying that person's so negative, they hate every meeting that we do, we said, well, what would it take for that to be true? You say you had a terrible experience. I believe you had a terrible experience. What's up with that, right? And that's really easy to say. Oh, it's really easy. I'm just going to be this generative person and I'm going to always appreciate everyone else's experience right in the moment because I'm some sort of saint or something. That doesn't happen, right? So what I've done based on this book, Researching Your Own Practice, The Discipline of Noticing, I have given myself a trigger to kind of ask myself that question. Did I marginalize anyone in that last conversation? Did I reduce my own credibility in that last conversation? So the trigger that I gave myself is walking through a doorway, which I do a lot because I have a difficult time sitting still, in case you can't tell by my gesticulating throughout this talk. So I walk through a doorway all the time. Every time I walk through a doorway through the course of my workday, I try to ask myself some of those key questions to sensitize myself to any epistemic issues that we might have had in the last conversation or the last interaction or whatever the case may be. And usually the thing about a doorway is you're usually not walking through a door 12 hours later, right? You walk through a doorway frequently enough where I can reflect on the conversation I just had, whether it was in text, a written conversation, or an audio conversation, whatever. I can reflect on my interactions with other people as I walk through that doorway, and usually not that much time has passed, so it won't be socially awkward if I go back to that other person or other people and say, look, I think I just messed up in that interaction. I think I may not have appreciated the things that you were saying, or I think I may have discredited myself, and I just want to point out why I was saying the things that I'm saying. So I think giving yourself a trigger, some sort of trigger to prompt you and build the habit of putting on your epistemic injustice hat or cape or whatever accessory, that can be really helpful in building those muscles to start building a more inclusive and more generative environment. And this all boils down to the fact that we need to work really hard not to dismiss intuition, feelings, and lived experience. We are all experts. If you are in this conversation right now, it's because you're a technical expert in something, right? And so we may know things, have a feeling about things, have intuition about something before we're actually able to articulate why we have that feeling, before we're able to gather metrics about it, right? I have so many things I can think of through my career where I'm like, look, I just have a feeling that this this thing over here is broken. And I can't really say why yet, but I have this feeling, and after a while I'm able to articulate why and gather metrics and all of those things. But we need to work hard to appreciate our own intuition, feelings, and lived experience, and we need to work hard to appreciate the intuition, feelings, and lived experience of others. And that variety is what makes us resilient enough to absorb these perturbations in our market, like what we're seeing today, and like the rapid acceleration that is just inherent in our modern times. So the interesting thing that happens at the end of the play, Gaslight, is that someone comes to the wife and he says, I think your husband is kind of a turd, and I don't really know why, I just have these suspicions, but that validates her lived experience, and she's able to tell him, and together they're able to actually validate all of the things that she thought were true. So they're able to validate that, yes, her husband is just sneaking into his own attic every day, not actually going to work. And eventually they find out that he's a murderer, but I guess I should have done a spoiler alert on that. Anyway, if you have the opportunity to be that third party that says, I hear your story, I believe you, tell me more, that is just such a powerful thing that can change the world that we live in, especially us, because we're building the technical infrastructure for relationships in the 21st century. So it's so important for us. And I think that's your brief introduction to epistemic injustice. If you want to look at more, there's a lot of stuff, but here are some sources. And if you have any questions, I think I see comments, so I have to look. But yeah, that's epistemic injustice.
All right. So feel free to ask questions. I think I see one now, which is just, are there any detailed sources to read up on that you know, or something that might be helpful?
Yeah, the book Epistemic Injustice, it's super short, but that's a really good place to start. It's just a short little book, Epistemic Injustice, and it provides a lot of examples that are easy to relate to.
So one thing I found interesting, I took one class on epistemology in university, so I'm not an expert. There was this concept of like epistemic privilege, which is like if you have a lived experience, you're in a unique position to be able to talk about it. So I find interesting the idea that somebody who has epistemic privilege might also suffer from epistemic injustice. So they might say, I want to talk about this experience, and then there are people, I don't want to listen, or like, that doesn't sound true.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all very confusing. And the like piled on top of that is the fact that you can do that to yourself, right? You can have an experience and you can kind of get the spidey sense it is related to whatever in this context, but you can think about yourself that you don't have the credibility to share that experience. So it's just all very complicated, the fact that you can do this to yourself and you can do this to other people potentially at the same time.
Are you seeing any culture changes in the tech world with regards to like people trying to be more open and listening? Or
yeah, I'm seeing it. I think it's just because we've seen some huge failures, right? Like there are notable ones. I love the Tay-bot, that the Tay-bot just went on Twitter and turned into a monster. That's like one of my favorite examples. Yeah, but we've seen all of these failures, right? And so I think companies are starting to appreciate that we have to introduce variety in our socio-technical ecosystems. Otherwise, we simply just can't absorb all of the change that is inherent in the market right now. So certainly I am starting to see a shift, and all of the talk about resilience, right? Because so much of that is just saying the way that you weather the storm is by introducing a positive kind of variety to your system.
yeah, I don't know, I can add the other moderators. Do you all have any questions? Or oh, I think
I just want to say that was an incredible talk, Kat. We're very
Thank you.
So I think I'll be finding out more about epistemic injustice. Shadab, do you have any particular questions that you want to raise?
Yes, so Kat, it was a really wonderful talk, and yeah, I enjoyed it thoroughly. And the question is, right, let's say when you are victim of epistemic injustice and you are getting a feeling, okay, this is the person, he's just reaching to that point and what you're going to do about it. Are you going to do for confrontation, or you're going to just present it with logics? What you're going to do with it?
Yeah, that is so dependent on the context, what you would do to kind of combat that, right? Because there could be a lot of different factors at play. In general, I tend to assume that other people aren't like, yeah, I'm going to perpetrate an epistemic injustice today. What's up, right? That they're going in with positive intent. And so sometimes what I have found personally helpful is just to kind of hang a light on it, right? And acknowledge what's happening and why it might be beneficial to sort of change direction. And there's so many things, right? That if you are oriented towards a generative conversation, right, then it's very easy for other people to orient the same way, right? Like when people say, that's unbelievable to me, I'll say, really? It's unbelievable? It was so easy for me to believe it when I was living it, right?
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Something like that, right? Where you're not saying that they're a bad person, right? You're just orienting the conversation towards a more generative direction where everyone's able to participate in moving it forward. And so that's what I found generally helpful, but it's so dependent on the context.
I found it interesting. You were talking a lot about like exercising, like exercising a muscle. Yeah, I think this kind of goes the same way about when we talk about confidence, especially with women. That we, it is a muscle that you need to exercise until you get there. So I think what will be interesting to actually see in the future is having maybe some workshops around this subject, because I really found it very interesting, and people need to be taught, I guess, sometimes educated about subjects like this. So yeah, I would love to see some workshops around it.
Yeah, that's a really interesting idea. Yeah.
Casey, do you have other questions in the queue?
I don't see any comments. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed that talk.
Oh, I see one comment asking about in-depth and context. If you want more, like not just the intro, that is provided in the book Epistemic Injustice, but there's a lot of writing from Chris Argyris about how to examine like your own inner dialogue and your dialogue with others in a professional setting. I think the one that I like is Organizational Traps. I don't know, I'll have to find a link and paste it in there, but it's how can you give yourself a trigger in the moment? How can you examine the conversation afterwards? So really practical in a professional setting. How do you develop those skills? That's it.
Interesting. Okay. Shall we wrap up, Casey?
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Yes, and we look forward to more talks from you in the future.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, it's wonderful talk. Yeah, thank you very much. Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay. I don't see Christine yet, who is our next speaker. So wait a bit. Okay, as soon as she comes in, we'll start her talk, even if it's earlier than 6:15. I think we're trying to get hold of her at the moment. If anyone has any questions about anything, just ask us on the chat. Also, don't forget that we have a party starting at 7 p.m. after all the talks are finished. And don't forget to to post tweet about the event using the hashtag GDG DevParty, and we'll pick a winner during the party tonight. And we'll post a link to the party sometime before 7 p.m. as well, so you can all join the meet for it. We should have some music playing.
Okay, so the last but not the least talk of the ethics and diversity track is by Christine. So Christine is the founder of feminist.ai and the cultural AI design tool. So she will give a talk on public as programmer, participatory design, and machine learning ethics. Yeah, interesting topic. And guys, before the talk starts, I would like to let you know that please feel free to ask questions in the live stream while the talk is going on. Don't be shy. At the end of the talk, I'll pick the questions and Christine will be happy to answer them. So you can ask as many questions as you want, just do it. Okay, so over to Christine when you're ready.
Yes, can you hear me? Hello. Okay. I just want to confirm you can hear me. Great. It's been a little bit of technical troubles here. My apologies. Our internet's a bit spotty in the garage, but it's such a pleasure to be here. It's wonderful to see everyone. And these talks have been absolutely phenomenal. So thank you for extending the invitation. Can you all then see these slides? Great, brilliant. Okay, so I'm Christine Meinders. I'm an exploratory designer and strategist focusing on emerging technologies, specifically AI. My practice incorporates critical, speculative, and social approaches to the creation of these emerging technologies. So I use collaborative and inclusive design approaches to create AI design tools and develop community-driven social AI projects. So in this presentation, I'm going to share personal research documentation, including the Cultural AI Design Tool, a framework enabling communities and individuals to engage in critical, ethical approaches to AI design. I'll then go on to chat about feminist AI, participatory futures, and through the talk, I'll define and provide some examples of ethics in machine learning systems. All right. And before I dive into the talk, I really want to go over a couple of definitions. I always do this, just so we're all on the same page in regards to definitions. I know all of you in the room are experts, and you all have very specific language that has very specific meaning. I'll try and highlight some general definitions here, but understand that my use of language and meaning may be significantly different from yours. So when I use the word culture, it can mean many things, such as corporate culture, subculture. Culture should not be equated with ethnicity. In my practice, I cite Diana Forsyth, who summarizes Clifford Geertz, who suggests that culture defines what people take for granted, the basic categories that people use to make sense of the world and decide how to act in it. I also pull from Allison Adam, who uses the term culture in a 3-level description as psychological, social, and cultural. I'll revisit this language around culture when I start to talk about the Cultural AI Design Tool. And when I use the word feminist and refer to the feminist AI community, I'm referencing feminism as defined by the writing voice of Bell Hooks, who writes, "Feminism is a movement to end sexism, sexist exploitation, and oppression." Some people confuse feminism as being anti-male. However, Hooks is clear to make the distinction that feminism is about ending sexism and oppression, stating that oppressive practices should be replaced with feminist thoughts and actions. And for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to use the word AI projects to describe ML-focused projects, products, systems, and experiences. So today I'm going to share my personal projects and practice exploring how social assumptions are embedded in the design of AI. And then I'll also share some of the feminist AI projects. Feminist AI is a fluid of collective of individuals who are co-creating these speculative and functional AI projects. So in the media, we see sexualized embodied representations of these female bodies. In the past, we've seen the disembodiment of female voices in smart assistants and actual embodied objects. Certain bodies, these female bodies, continue to be used to gender these AI products in media. We see this representation mirrored in socially problematic products that could benefit from more inclusive design approaches. And I think we've seen kind of throughout the talks, you know, there's a history of not necessarily having these multiple voices and these perspectives. So really kind of understanding what that can lead to. And slowly we see organizations working to address some of these social challenges. Some notable organizations specifically, you know, connected with or outside of, you know, Google or, you know, those completely removed, you know, are looking at the UCLA Center for Critical Inquiry, led by Professor Sophia Umoja Noble and Sarah T. Roberts, Black in AI, Control Z AI, which is this wonderful, creative, exploratory AI zine space, and MLUX, to name just a few. And so how might we start to design products that allow us to opt into these digital experiences? The project Smile Transducer was originally created to explore emotion contagion with digital devices. But the more interesting outcome was to explore products that in the very design can really kind of protect us from surveillance and unwanted emotions analysis, yet allow us to opt in. So if you see here, there's an image of the individual, actually one of my mentors, Kathy, who is using the design, the Smile Transducer, and actually it's a sticker. So you can turn it off and on when you do want to share information from your body, but it also protects you from sharing information. Many approaches to the design of AI systems fail to consider community and default to problematic tools and assumptions used to design these AI systems. And so I'm going to talk about the cultural design tool and go over some examples so you can actually see how it's progressed over the years. This quote from Diana Forsyth, anthropologist and AI anthropologist, really sums up the feelings about kind of why I want to do this work. She writes, from an anthropological perspective, you know, these AI tools embody values and assumptions held often tacitly by those who construct them. So this tool, the cultural design tool, is a socially focused cultural blueprint used to design AI and emerging technology projects, with the ability to integrate with AI tools, such as existing creative coding tools, and humanistic lenses. It's a critical exploratory research tool, so it is functional, but it's actually used to get people to kind of critically think or even deconstruct existing projects. It pairs social and technical perspectives in the design process. The tool integrates with other AI tools. We're working on our first integration with Runway ML. And it can also be used to design with or critically explore theoretical and ethical perspectives. The current versions are paper and web-based, and it's used to design with Teachable Machine, Wekinator, Runway ML, and Arduino, to name a few. And there are three main ways I actually started to approach research about this tool. So when I started learning about artificial intelligence, and specifically, you know, we're talking about machine learning, I actually learned by reading a lot of theory. I couldn't quite connect necessarily just kind of entering in the code space, and those spaces weren't necessarily accessible to me at that time. But coming in and looking at some of the social implications of these products and projects really forced me to think about how I could create and start to understand and think about designing in this space. So I read books from feminist, queer, and post-humanist researchers. I explored critical prototyping tools, and I worked with communities to kind of test these prototypes. And here's some of the books from my research. At the time, Professor Noble's book and Ruha Benjamin's book were not out yet. They're not on the list. But we have Alison Adam, who, of course, writes about feminist AI, and very much feminist AI projects stems from and comes from her book, Artificial Knowing. Margaret Bowden, who talks about different systems. Christine Borgman, who talks about critical approaches to data, and Sarah Ahmed, who writes a lot about affect and social emotions. Additionally, Sarah Blumenthal writes a lot about embodiment as being this kind of beyond human. So if we look at how we're designing these products, and if we can kind of reframe our frameworks to be social, environmental, part of this larger ecosystem, designing from an ecosystem's perspective from the onset, it can actually lead to very interesting research and projects. So I discovered Wekinator as my primary AI design software, and created with perspectives from multiple communities, not just feminist AI, but many communities around Los Angeles, in different locations of the US and outside of the US. And so this is inspired by feminist theory, Alice and Adam, of course, in Wekinator, created by Rebecca Feebrink. And really you can kind of see the first prototype that was created. And it's quite interesting because you're equating social considerations, technical considerations, and community, and you're kind of wrapping them all in one piece. And while this might be kind of like an awkward first exploration, it is interesting to think about how we can start to design from those perspectives. And here are different prototypes that emerged over the years, which really highlight how community contributes to the inputs in the tool. So in this example, you can see digital and paper explorations. And here you can see the research embodied in the digital prototype, which includes academic texts, integration with Wekinator, and community-sourced ideas around AI. The pink color indicated community-sourced inputs. And in the second iteration of the tool, community recommendations were given equal standing in the interface design. So really looking at how we can kind of prioritize community inputs, or in the design actually make them equally important. And in this version, there was a move from digital to physical prototyping. And a lot of this was based on feedback from community, right, and previous testing. Individuals wanted physical entry points into learning about AI, and this was really reflected in the creation of the tool. In the fourth iteration, this paper prototype, community members contributed their own cards or used cards created by other members from similar communities. This tool was designed as a precursor to the digital tool. And in this fifth iteration, the functional digital prototype, here communities can actually collaborate at multiple points in the design process. And this is great. So in this current version, I'm working with designers Michelle Gong, Matt Also Adams, the Chaos team, who's based in different locations in Europe, and we're all putting together and kind of refining some of these approaches. So here you can see, you have the target information, maker information, and a lot of these cultural lenses. So I want to quickly talk about some of the findings from this research. It's really interesting because when I started, there wasn't kind of that level of awareness that we have when we talk about kind of AI and emerging technologies today. Over the past couple of years, people are learning more and more about kind of these processes and these designs. But at the time, there weren't really these tools that bridge the social and technical and AI development. We see that happening now, absolutely. But in 2016, not so much. And it didn't actually incorporate community in the design process as well. People generally wanted to learn about AI, but they felt really excluded from the design process. And then I don't think this is new to you in any way, but everyone has different definitions of artificial intelligence. And very specifically, kind of in the corporate space, we're talking about machine learning products, but different people have different definitions. So really kind of creating a shared definition is really important. Lastly, people felt detached from the screen-based graphical user interface for AI. It's really easy for people to learn through physical objects. That's one of the great things about Wekinator, actually, is this ability to connect with Arduino and really kind of explore physically and think about kind of how our actions influence these products. So I'm going to go through a walkthrough before I, kind of expand a little bit more on some of the features. I do want to highlight some of the insights and some of the goals. So based on the findings, creating accessible entry points to AI can really increase this engagement. And a lot of individuals for whom these systems are built don't really understand how it works because of this high barrier to entry. And having a social entry point makes it more accessible for people to learn about AI. And then people need to co-create their shared language around AI. And our goals. Here, one of the main things that we really kind of want to achieve with this product is to create this accessible tool to design, co-design, and actually deconstruct AI products. Also using deep learning to identify patterns and how people are designing about AI and with AI, for AI. So very specifically looking at representation, but also looking at trends. I don't know if you remember the chatbot trend, in 2016, 2017, but how are those trends kind of feeding and affecting the culture of AI design? And also incorporating social considerations and exploratory lenses while designing these projects. So the social is equally as important as the code. And here are some of the social considerations constructed by community. So again, these kind of lenses were created by community. And some of the lenses and some of the things that people are designing with are very relevant in the product design space. Very specifically looking at something like proxemics, comfort level across locations with different devices, with different individuals. Designing for, 1 to 5 years out, 3 to 5 years out, 25 years out, right? So looking at time and exploratory, speculative approaches in the process, which is really unique to the tool. But additionally, looking at very, very real present day challenges, specifically through bias, right? So we have these bias filters that were contributed from community. So individuals can put these different filters kind of on their design projects as they're designing and reflect on some of the social implications. And, again, having these multiple entry points to the tool from non-programmers to seasoned developers. So the idea is creative coding experts, exploratory research, and product development can all enter in the tool. And so we're not only teaching about machine learning, but we're using deep learning in this tool to understand patterns and how people are learning and designing AI. So here's some quick examples of some of the class projects that were created with this tool. I teach at CCA and CalArts. And so here is an image from our posthuman AI culture and creativity class. Here are some student projects created with the tool. You can check out ccai.com. And see some of these student projects. Absolutely phenomenal. Future fruit predictor, looking at futures of fruit based on different environmental factors. Posthuman politics by Ellie, which looks at using runway ML to create different iterations of design materials when kind of creating something like graphic design. Enlightened Shadow, created by Ty, which uses Weaponator to explore kind of embodied approaches to robotics. And for the AI culture and creativity class at CalArts, I teach both design and art students to think critically as they design with ML. Here's an image of Sarah Sethi Amoy, a professional performer-composer in the AI culture and creativity class at CalArts. And she used the cultural design tool paired with Weaponator to inform the design of her custom-built glove interface, NAMI. And NAMI is designed for live electroacoustic musical performance and improv. Specifically, it's a tool extending her own multicultural background, and these are her words that I'm repeating. Primarily drawing from and contributing to the augmented trumpet, Nikki, African-American performer, composer, and gestural repertoires. Sarah has written about her usage of the cultural design tool in exploring identity through design, a focus on the cultural body via NAMI, which is set to be published in 2029 proceedings. So really excited about that. And then on to feminist AI. I just want to check in, see everyone's doing okay. I'm part of this larger community that works on these projects, and I'm really honored to represent them today. I am one of many, many people. So please, when I present these projects, understand large community creating these projects. In 2016, I started Feminist AI. And Feminist AI is a critical AI research community responding to these common assumptions and biases embedded in industry and academia. I believe there's a better way to design AI projects by incorporating voices in our communities that aren't included in our technologies. And that's one of the main reasons I started Feminist AI. So rather than just simply kind of write about the problems, it seemed to make sense to actually kind of create a completely different space where people could come together and just kind of talk and feel comfortable about making in a slow, not necessarily product-driven way, but slow, exploratory, kind of warm space to learn and to be. So here's our methodology. We have very specific ways of designing these projects, and here are a few of the methods that we really pull from. And each year we produce a new participatory critical AI project. So here are the projects from 2016 to 2019. I'm not going to go over all of them in the talk today. But here you can see in 2016 material voice design, which looks at emotions analysis and the gendering of voices. 2017 intelligent protests, where we're protesting across realities and engaging in digital protests, which I think is increasingly relevant as we're moving everything online. And then contextual normalcy, which looks at redefining approaches to mental health. And then our embodiment sound local ML projects is something that we did in 2019 and we're currently working on. And I'll also share our most recent projects in code. So I'm going to start by talking about various design, ethics, and ML projects. This project was created by the 2019 CalArts AI Culture and Creativity class. And in this project, we used localized machine learning to explore privacy and location-based sound and memories via distributed Coral dev boards. And so sound imprints, to the name of the project, recorded and sourced sounds to be triggered at a specific location. So in this project, students explored the ethics around facial and object detection through sound design. In the first iteration, our goal with sound imprints is to place these technologies within a context that evokes joy and presents the core artificial intelligence concepts as approachable for general audiences. But there were some really kind of interesting things that happened in the creation of this project. One of them was looking at kind of pairing sound and face detection and what it means to be detected. It's one thing to kind of see a label. It's another thing to actually kind of hear the presence of detection. So what does it mean to have an audio indicator when a human face is detected? What does it mean to continually reproduce that sound while the human is in the frame of the camera? Or what does it mean to delay the sound and perhaps kind of place those audio indicators after an individual has left a space? And this is really interesting because it starts to get us to think about different approaches to privacy and how we can playfully explore some of these approaches in our critical design projects. And so this exploration of location-based machine learning design was created by Feminist AI. It's titled Information as Storyteller, in which we use these AR filters and the Coral dev boards to trigger location-based memories. So multiple people worked on this project, and actually I see the attributions credit is not on here. I'll quickly just share. Shu Oh created the models. Janet Thompson helped with the language and sound concept. In this project, we used edge devices to uncover memories as encoded data from embodied information. So using these AR Instagram filters created by Francois, we allowed people to explore the space of the Bendix building, which is a building in downtown Los Angeles, from its use during the 1950s onwards, as originally one of the headquarters for Bendix Research and Development to its later incarnation as a clothing manufacturer center for the Seymour Hersh Company. So using the Coral dev board and site-specific AR filters, we were able to create a contextual location-based experience. Pardon me. All right, so on to contextual normalcy. Contextual normalcy is a participatory AI research project in which artificial intelligence and crowdsourced data is used to create alternative concepts of normalcy and mental health. So let's see if this will play. All right, bear with me one moment as I move my cursor over. All right, So with contextual normalcy, we're using AI to question potential assumptions and how we think about feelings and how Western concepts of normalcy often dominate what is considered normal. And so here you can see an individual identifying a very specific feeling. And this was launched on the Google Play Store a while ago. So they're asked a question, and these questions were co-created by community, right? What do you do when you feel joy? And they were co-created by people around the world. Users identify and tag their own keywords associated with the feeling. We're also asking questions about diet, so looking at the relationship between gut, mood, and feeling. And then there's an idea of kind of attaching consent. So what does this mean to provide and give your information with that specific question? They release their feeling, and then they could start to look about their thinking about feeling over time. Additionally, one of the things when you're kind of releasing these feelings, you don't want to feel alone. And this is really kind of prevalent right now. You can see other people's responses to those feelings. So really kind of creating a space for people to be connected. And this is increasingly relevant during the COVID. Additionally, you can see kind of the transparency in the design. Where was the data collected? What models were used? And so right now, we're continuing to think about feelings, and we're asking users around the world to continually contribute these ideas about feelings so we can find patterns in language across locations. So some of the critical approaches to this design worked on by Michelle Gong. She did all of the visual for contextual normalcy. So it was really to design so that a feeling can be a data point, it can change over time, and design for privacy. And so this project really highlights how these invisible injustices are sealed into the design of digital products through emotions analysis, through invasive algorithms, through biased knowledge systems, to name a few. And actually, I'm going to see if I can play. Here's an example of removing a feeling from your body. And here. So you see individuals, looking at different ways they would get rid of a feeling. On the body, rather. And then here's an example of removing something inside the body. So how does that inform the design? And really kind of one of the things we looked at is actually using the phone, throwing the phone to release a feeling. And here you can see kind of the transparency in the design of the app as well. All right, so let me play this again. Go. All right, so as data collection will continue to occur across realities, we've come up with new tools and design to protect our bodies and our feelings, having more control of our bodies as inputs. So this version of this embodied data research was created by Justin Lee and Carrie Crooks, who are interning at Feminist AI. Absolutely phenomenal. Most of our projects are AI XR projects, which source data from these different digital realities. And here you can see individuals actually kind of, there's no hierarchy, right? They can actually take this information and create their own framework when exploring, these kind of digital products, really kind of taking data off a spreadsheet and putting it into an embodied space. And here's a rendering created by Anastasia Victor of Place, which looks like this idea. Essentially, we're looking at placing feelings in an environment, but being a little bit more critical of that, right? So when we talk about placing feelings, is it actually appropriate to place feelings out kind of in this space? Or is it more interesting to look at kind of a shared collective of feelings across these different spaces? Overall, kind of understanding different thinking about feelings around the world. All right, and I'll quickly just kind of touch upon this project because I want to get to encode and wrap up, but this is thoughtful voice design. We explored algorithmic transparency and used AI as a design material to create these voice plugins for Alexa and other AI systems. So this whole project really looks at the gendering and humanizing of voices kind of through these technologies. And so really kind of rather than creating this gender neutral voice, the goal was to move beyond this binary voice design. So we looked at kind of this pitch changing tool that changes the pitch of voices. And really kind of looking at how we can use sound to reveal the presence of very specific algorithms. Sound is a design material. And here's some of our prototypes that were displayed at Spectacular Grammar and basically an art installation curated by Renee Reisman. And here's some prototypes that explore voice boxes, and critical voice design. So we did a lot of iterations of research, and very specifically in the right-hand side, you can see we actually put in these co-defined voice boxes, the materials that were used, where individuals were kind of told to change their voices. So some individuals were told to change their tone. Some individuals were told to soften their voices. So really kind of interesting, fun research. And if you're into sound research, I just finished this really interesting paper on sonification in security operations centers I would check out by Alamati and Axton. And I'm going to conclude with our most recent project called ENCODE. So ENCODE is a collaborative critical making research project centered on the values and research from the book Algorithms of Oppression. So really, from this book, we're creating all of our programming, right? Algorithms of Oppression by Professor Sophia Emoja Noble. And really kind of with this book, we're creating these community education modules. We have a book club that you can sign up for. And we're producing these critical prototypes from the readings. And one of the things that's really interesting about that is rather than just kind of reading something and thinking about it, actually making helps you understand a lot of the social implications of these projects. And so through our programming, we're exploring search. And this is one of the key features of Algorithms of Oppression, looking at the past and present and futures of search. And I'm happy to chat more about this. I'll put information at the end of the talk so you can reach out if you'd like to participate. It's a really fun project that we are just launching digitally. So please join us if you're interested. And I'm going to conclude with the feminist AI philosophy, which provides some community sourced approaches to ethical machine learning design. And here, these are things that have emerged over time, right? So number 4, multiple entry points. Number 5, the project could be a social response or technical making. Number 7, attributing everything. Really kind of looking at different ways we can design in this space. Using AI as a tool to highlight culture. Really kind of having folks affected by these technologies, creating these technologies, and having people speak to their own personal or community experiences. And so lastly, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Feminist AI, which is under the umbrella of Mutable Studio. And Mutable Studio is the home to Tomorrow People and MLUX, which is created by Michelle Carney. Mutable Studio is comprised of artists, musicians, and researchers. And I'd really like to note that Feminist AI has received a lot of love and support from MLUX, from the Google community. And one thing that's really great about kind of this combination of these different organizations is you have kind of this critical thinking in approaches. And sometimes once you kind of learn these skills, there's no place to go. And so kind of pairing and jumping over to MLUX, you kind of see the machine learning in practice, which is great. So I send a lot of the students and the Feminist AI members to these different organizations. There's a lot of people who make this possible. These are a few of the many names who've inspired or who've worked on these Feminist AI projects. And I will just conclude with some contact information. So please sign up for the public-facing beta of the AI design tool. You can also join the Feminist AI community on our website, celebrating algorithms of oppression through our ENCODE programming. And right now we're co-hosting the book club with Women's Center for Creative Works, which is absolutely going to be amazing. Also, please check out the student projects. I can't kind of support and promote the work enough. The California College of the Arts students, the CalArts students, And actually, I added a link to the CalArts Expo today, which you can check out online. Absolutely phenomenal. And we'll have our own CalArts student projects up shortly. If you'd like to learn about the tool, feminist AI programming, or student work, please reach out. That's it.
Great talk, Christine. And it's really wonderful to see the fusion of emerging technologies like AI and social development to solve some of these problems. But my question is, like the tech is a high entry barrier. So how do we make sure that this solution reaches the masses, and especially to the people who are less privileged?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Thank you. Thank you for the thoughtful approaches and questions here, because it's something we continually struggle with, right? If you're talking about technology and you're talking about designing with technology, how can you teach about technologies without necessarily using computers all of the time? And very specifically, artificial intelligence. And I think one of the things that we're trying to do is have these paper versions of the design tool. And when we talk to people about machine learning, verbally explaining information, or using very specific kind of known information to people that we're connecting with. So we're kind of co-designing the messaging. To give you a very specific example, when you're talking about quilting, that's a really wonderful way to explain and talk about neural networks, right? So finding the language in each group that you're working with, and also kind of listening to those concerns and then positioning them within some of these machine learning approaches. So I would say one way that we can achieve this is by starting with social, paper, spoken word, and then slowly kind of moving into spaces where people can apply these concepts if they do have access to computers. Not everybody will or does or wants to.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So I will put one comment from the YouTube live stream, and can you type out the contact info in this box? It is too small to see on my screen.
Oh, sorry.
Probably, yeah.
Sure. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
Email. Feel free to email info@mutable.studio. And you can also personally email me. I'll just provide both of those. And then, yeah, I'll put the AI.com. So if you want to sign up for the beta. So those are a couple of ways you can reach out. Mutable Studio is Feminist AI. And of course, this is our website, Feminist AI. And if you go to Feminist AI, you can sign up for the book club, which we're starting on Tuesday. So really exciting. Definitely please connect in some way.
And looks like people are interested in learning more. So somebody has commented, Hamad, that any other sources available to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about kind of looking at individuals who operate more in this social tech space, really, when I started learning about AI, there weren't a lot of individuals doing socially focused work, but there are and were specifically AI Now, Data and Society, looking at the work of Kate Crawford, Dana Boyd. There's a lot of different individuals in this space. I'm happy on our website, which we're redoing right now, but we typically kind of post a list of resources. Yeah. Also, MLUX, Michelle Carney has a great piece as well, which we'll put on our blog that links out to these different educational entry points.
Okay, that's really great, Christine. Thank you very much. And okay, Cassie and Jen, if you have any questions or comments for Christine, I have one more, but I'll ask at the end.
Oh, Jen, you're muted.
I'm good.
I have a question. So a lot of in like pop culture and media, AI is often portrayed as very negatively. Like there's a lot of evil AI stuff out there. What are your thoughts on like kind of changing the reputation of AI and that sort of thing? Because a lot of your projects are very positive and helpful.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question, and I absolutely agree with you, Casey. When you look at some of the histories and the research, it's you see kind of this gendering and the sexualization of these AI, like in media, as we saw, but also in products. And one of the things that I think is really important is not only having multiple individuals from different perspectives on these teams creating these projects, like offering some sort of critical approaches. I would argue there would be a great role for a socio-tech consultant in, media, specifically film, but also in a lot of product development. But I think kind of incorporating critical approaches from the very beginning is a really important thing to do, and also contributing to and funding and being a part of supporting communities that are kind of creating their own approaches and projects. So really kind of allowing more entry points and more projects to emerge. Yeah.
Okay, so Christine, so did you have any issues in the solutions that you worked for so far in training the tool to handle machine learning biases, especially the different cultures, because the different cultures may have different yardsticks for feminism.
Yes.
And they can have different problems.
Yeah, that is a great question. I think one of the things that we're looking at specifically with the design tool is not to say, here is the answer, here is the solution to bias, right? But it is to say, here is one approach that this specific community is looking at. Here is another approach. How are you actually defining these lenses? So when you go through and you actually kind of have your audit at the end, you can see who's contributed to it, what their definitions are, right? So just like we all have different definitions of AI, there's also different definitions of feminism. The feminist AI approach as being kind of inciting the voice of bell hooks is quite different, than individuals in a different feminist space. So really kind of tracing that through the design process is very important. And then looking at that ability to compare these different approaches and then start to remix those approaches. It does affect the training, absolutely. It affects, it depends on actually how you're using the tool as well. So if you're using the cultural design tool standalone, and you're training very specific data sets, that's one experience versus using the design tool with pre-existing, creative coding tool like Runway ML. That's a completely different experience because you're using that model that already kind of has these assumptions baked in. So you really have to identify what you're using and how you're using it.
Okay, thank you very much. And Cassie or Jen, do you have any thoughts or comments on this?
Thanks a lot, Christine, for joining us as a speaker. I don't have any questions at the moment. I'm actually doing something on the side for the party after this talk. But yeah, we appreciate your presence here today, and it's a really interesting talk. I was listening to it while I'm typing away. But yeah, I don't have any questions at the moment. Please say unless you have something.
No, I was curious, I guess, how did you first kind of get into AI as kind of a tool?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I started this and this whole kind of feminist AI project came out of my research and thesis year at Art Center, College of Design and Media Design Practices. And very specifically, one of the reasons that I created this is I felt like this space was pretty, it felt very exclusive. When I would go to meetups, there were very few. There was a very specific type of individual who continually went to these meetups, and those spaces weren't comfortable. And so you would talk about these things, and you look around, and actually people really didn't understand what was happening. They were trying to teach kind of elements of technology, but there weren't these kind of warm, inclusive, just kind of comfortable entry points. And I thought, well, no, that's a really great way to make this. I was in kind of a high arts space, a critical space, but it felt very uncomfortable. The tech spaces were uncomfortable. My academic space was really supportive, but also slightly uncomfortable. And so what I did is I kind of ditched everything and just went to community. And I thought, you know what? I know people have worked in these spaces before. I found Allison Adams' book. I found Rebecca Feebrink. I reached out to them, you know, and always kind of looked at how can we honor the work that has come before and how can we highlight, you know, work that's already been done in this space and build off of it and contribute and attribute. So really, the whole approach kind of came from being really uncomfortable.
Okay, so yeah, thank you very much, Christine. It was really wonderful experience and a good learning for me as well. Honestly, I was not aware that there's so much development going on in the industry with these type of technologies, AI. And I have seen one, I read one report about the blockchain being used and yeah, in the similar area, but that was not especially included with feminism, but yeah, it was more about the empowerment of weaker societies, and they were using blockchain. That was also an interesting project. And then I just went through your talk and it's so good. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for your wonderful talk. And I guess we don't have any more questions. So yeah.
Great. And thank you all for your patience. My router was a little bit, I had to reset the router. So it was lovely to join you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We sorted it out in the end.
Yes.
And Shadab, do you want to just remind people about the party and maybe
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
the raffle?
Cassie, you would like to change the slide, please? Okay, guys, so it's party time. So yeah, I know you guys have absorbed so much information in the last couple of hours. Even I have, you know. So I hope you found this session useful, and it's party time now. Not now, so it started at 7. So let's meet other developers in the dev party and have fun. So you have the link in the screen right now. And I must tell you that there's opportunity to win prizes as well. So just see you all there, and let's meet other developers and do networking and talk about what issues they're facing, or maybe there is something that we can contribute in their life as well. So thank you very much, guys. And Jen, you want to make any comment?
Yeah, there's still a chance to tweet, so don't forget to use the hashtag GDG DevParty. I see a lot of tweets.
Yeah, there's still time. You know, you have 15 minutes.
That's why I've been busy on the side. You know,
yeah.
Yeah, I've been looking at who's tweeting and adding them to their, you know, the entries for the raffle. Casey, you want to say something before?
No, thank you all for listening, and we hope you had a good time.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.